I am Lawrence Chuno, and this is Doing Jazz. Hello everyone and welcome to Doing Jazz. My name is Lawrence Chuno and this episode is with legendary guitarist, composer and singer Leni Stern. Miss Stern has made her marks in the world of jazz with her trademark inventive guitar exploration and her unrestricted sound that perfunctorily makes use of her diverse musical and cultural influences. Miss Stern is prominent in the world music circle and has worked with acclaimed African musicians, played in numerous international world music festivals, and has directed a good number of world music tours. Leni Stern's musical catalog is rich. She has released more than 20 studio albums till date and is currently touring with her trio and recording new music. Leni Stern is not just a musician. She is also a successful businesswoman who has released most of her music under her label, Leni Stern Recordings. In fact, one of the highlights of our conversation is the story of how she started releasing her work under her label. The song playing in the background is Hide and Seek from her album Dakar Suite. Later in the conversation, you will hear another song of hers, Mercy, from the same album. After listening to my conversation with Leni Stern, you can learn more about her by going to the website of the show, www.doingjazz.net, and you can listen to more episodes of the show by subscribing on iTunes, Spotify, and every other podcast vendors. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I present the eclectic, the prolific, and the legendary Leni Stern in your face. What did you say?
Beautiful microphones that we use for recording today. They used to be radio microphones.
Really?
Yeah, I did an interview in a German radio station, and in the lobby of the radio station, it was in Stuttgart in Germany, in the south of Germany, they had a glass vitrine with the historic microphones that they used, and they said this microphone studio this, like the news or the special, the cultural feuilleton, and all this, and they were old Neumann RCA microphones, you know, those like big things with their own power supply box. They were in this vitrine and they were used for talking. Nowadays the best jazz records are recorded on those old microphones.
Let's do a proper introduction.
All right then.
Leni Stern, welcome to Doing Jazz.
Thank you.
Okay, we've been talking and I wish I had been capturing everything. So we talked a little bit about artists getting grants. I was just wondering if you could recap what you said about New York artists being able to get grants, or the different sources you mentioned. Mayor Bloomberg. Do you want to talk about it a little bit?
We started our conversation because my friend Alice Soyer, who's a musician and a painter, came from France, and she has a French artist grant. And I just discussed with her how smart it was of the French government to give grants to their artists, because the art is really what represents a people. What we remember after time, if you think about Egypt without the pyramids, we wouldn't even know about, they ruled half of the world, but their art is what makes them immortal. So it's an essential part of society. And any smart government like the French government would support that to accumulate more cultural wealth, because it's not just Wall Street that makes us rich. It's also Andy Warhol and Miles Davis and John Coltrane that give us prestige as a nation, that make us enviable to the rest of the world. Our dancers, even in Russia, when they had nothing, when communism was just starting and trying to find a system, they had the Bolshoi ballet. Nobody cared here. Even the people that hated communists, they loved the Bolshoi ballet.
Definitely.
So it transcends. It's a little bit like sports is like that too. And I think in America we do very well with sports. We give sports scholarships, and I wish we would do the same thing with the arts like we do with sports. The arts are more favored in Europe. Even in Germany, where we're the world champions of soccer, you don't get a soccer scholarship.
Yeah.
It's so in America we have a different system that I was mentioning that is very good, and it is increasingly wide spread. It's the system of grants, where you can apply for grants for a certain project, and it's not just large grants that are difficult to come by, but small grants to travel to Africa to study, like $5,000, $7,000 grants that you can get from different organizations that sort of take the place of what in Europe is the support of the artists. Chamber Music for America, the National Endowment for the Arts, unfortunately that has been stopped by our current president. But I always said that whenever in New York you couldn't get a grant for something, you would or you couldn't get money for something, you would just go to the Bloomberg Foundation, because our ex-mayor is a wonderful philanthropist and has funded, BAM, so many pieces of arts, because he's aware. So we have generous wealthy people in America that will fund the arts, will fund museums, will make paintings. But I sort of like the system in Europe, where the government recognizes that we as artists are an important contribution to society.
Yes, and it's not just a benign contribution. I know that in today's society we value science, we value technology, engineering, mathematics, but it turns out that they are very useful, but the arts actually feeds those fields.
Yeah. Like
for instance, music. Because of music, the computer has gone through several generations, to the point that today Mac computers, for instance, are very, very strong, and they're used for several other things. And it's because of music, because of media, that inspired those improvements.
I wasn't aware of that. Of course, it makes total sense.
Yes, yeah. The same thing with dancers,
right?
Yeah, acting and so forth. They inspire improvement in the technology, in everyday technology that we use. So art is, I don't know, art is very important. I studied mathematics, but the artistic part of me, I cherish it all the time. I remember it. That's the first thing I remember when I wake up each day. Yeah. So we're talking about how I met you. I want to recap this story. So I saw you in Pittsburgh. You were performing with
Acoustic Africa.
Yeah, Acoustic Africa. Dobe Nyahore from Cote d'Ivoire. Manu Gallo from Cote d'Ivoire, I think. Kares Fotso from Cameroon. And
Ali Keita
from
Mali.
Yes, yeah. The bill just had the three African ladies. And when you came out, it was a pleasant surprise, and you played wonderfully. And I'm like, who is this? I want to know this person, So when I moved to, I listened to when I went back home and I checked out your music and I listened to it, and I was very impressed by how prolific you've been. And when I moved to New York, I ran into you at La Poisson Rouge at an Esperanza Spalding concert, and we took a selfie and put it on Instagram. And then I ran into you again in a shrine, and then I contacted you, and after a while we were able to sit down here. So that's how I met you. I want to talk a little bit about your directing that tour. What kind of, is there anything you could say about it in the perspective of being a tour director, musical director? I mean, yeah.
It was a total pleasure because, a band is only as good as its artists. And Dubin is a fantastic dancer, aside from being a musician. Manu Gallo, whom I knew and was already a fan of independently, I had discovered her on YouTube, and we were watching her here, and we loved her records, is a fabulous percussionist on top of being a bass player. I mean, she learned how to play percussion in the village. She was the first girl that played the drums, and everybody had a discussion. Is this proper? Is it not? She sounds good. Well, I guess then it's proper. We've never seen it before, but it sure sounds good. Well, so we're seeing it now. Caresse Fozo from Cameroon is a wonderful songwriter, a poet, aside from being and like you, I think she's a biochemist and a singer-songwriter. So she's a big brain, which shows in her lyrics. And Ali Keita is one of the best balafon players. Yeah. I knew him, but I spent a lot of time. My journey in Africa started in Mali because one of my, you know how they say in America, the bucket list was, I want to play the festival in the desert in Timbuktu. And I always said that we have a little office here with my label and my touring and my promotions. All gets done from where we are here in the middle of all these plants and artifacts that I've collected all over the world. I always said like, well, we would get a tour in the West Coast, and I said, but you know what, remember, I want to play in Timbuktu. So I said that for years, and everybody thought this was like kind of funny because also in America, Timbuktu is an expression for far away, far place. For very far away. And so I think at some point I just wrote to the festival in the desert and I said, I love what you're doing. I have been a fan for many, many years. If you need an artist from America, I would love to come. And it's a sort of festival where the international artists have to get a grant or government support to get sent over there, and the African artists get the money. Okay. Which I kind of thought was a very good idea because I don't think Africa has these institutions that gives grants, or the government rarely sends their artists. They send their mathematicians, they send their sports guys, huge sports guys. I mean, the best soccer players come from Africa. They all get exported, but some of the best musicians also come from Africa, and they don't get exported. So anyway, I was happy, and they wrote me back. Mamatal Agdahman, who was a Tuareg from the festival in Desert, wrote me back and invited me to play at the festival in the desert in Timbuktu. Where
when was this?
10 years ago.
Okay.
I think it was 10 years ago. I looked it up the other day because there was this film about the war in Mali that I was part of. And so I was very familiar with Malian music. I ended up playing with Salif Keita and Toumani Jabate and Amisako and Basikou Kouyate, all the great stars in Mali, because I met them at the festival. When I got asked to be the musical director of Acoustic Africa, it was a chance for me to work with other cultures from Africa, because the fabulous thing about African music is that it's like language. Rhythm is like language in Africa. So in Cameroon alone there is 213 languages and or maybe 214, I don't know how many languages, and rhythms that go with all of that. Côte d'Ivoire rhythms are different. The different ethnicities in Côte d'Ivoire have different rhythms. So for me, this was just like sort of a smorgasbord. Like there's a Cameroonian, like my friend Richard Bonar here, that knows all those fast pikutsi, like like too much coffee. And, so they brought all these different influences together, and I had at that point already published like 4 or 5 records mixing jazz and African music, and I when you're a jazz musician, everybody always, anything they can't explain, they say it's because it's from Africa. Like they say like this swings, and you say like, what is swing? And they like say it's because it's from Africa. And like, okay, it like sounds like a dotted triplet to me, kind of lazy, sort of like. So that's like Africa, like this. But actually, that is the most correct answer you could give. It doesn't, when you're like a young music student, it doesn't really answer a whole hell of a lot of your questions. Unless you just stop asking questions, just listen to African music and stop putting names on it. You just start grooving, and you say like,
and start feeling it.
And they say like, okay, now also I have to search for a name for what this is. But I sort of brought jazz back to its roots in Africa, which was my intention. I just sort of I found the connection when I was in Africa, and so I was happy to connect the dots, if you want to. And with Acoustic Africa, it was another opportunity to connect the dots in an American fashion, because Dobe, now they all live in Europe, so they have that sort of a European pop sensibility. But I think I was called on because I'm definitely an American blues, funk, and jazz musician. So we have a different connection to Africa than the Europeans do. Our African population was brought here as slaves against their will, and they brought their whole culture with them and Americanized it and gave us jazz and funk and rock and roll. It all came from there. So the music, the trajectory of the history was a different direction. And it was interesting to combine it all.
And explore the differences at the same time.
Yes, the richness of that. We all brought our songs from different parts with the different rhythms and different aspects of it. And it was fantastic.
Yeah. I'm Nigerian, and we were colonized by the British. And this is my opinion, and I think it's the opinion of many people who understand Nigerian music, even though we have Fela Kuti. But I think that for a Nigerian, when we talk about modern Nigerian music, we're thinking westernized sound. But I feel like when it comes to the French-speaking Africans, maybe because of how the French colonized them differently, and maybe they appreciated their arts better, I don't know. I feel like modern Malian music, for instance, is still very African. It's kind of like they play it on African instruments, and everybody would hear it and appreciate its modernness. But at the same time, they know that this is from Africa. But I feel like when it comes to Nigerian music or Ghanaian music or English-speaking African, it's kind of different. I don't know if you've ever, as somebody who is vast in African music, if you've ever thought about the subtle differences, but I feel like you focus on...
I have noticed that. Okay. I have noticed it. Also, I have the great pleasure of playing with Kofo, the Wonder Man, Kofo Ayuwan Fowora, who's from Nigeria, and he's a great talking drum player.
Oh, okay.
So in his band, we do a traditional set and a not traditional set. So the traditional set is just the old chants. It's like a juju party. Those things that are traditionally played for weddings and funerals and baby naming ceremonies, all of that. And man, that's the part where anybody comes, where we used to do it at the Zinc Bar, and I was finally invited to play with them. I play Kalegas also. I in order to understand rhythm in Africa, I learned how to play it. It's the easiest way.
Yeah.
Guitarist, like Goni is almost like percussion instrument, but like I wanted to just play percussion. Guitar theoretically is part of the percussion family, so I felt like I'm not going very far there. and the people loved the original music very much. The other one was like, was cool. It was Afrobeat, which is like, Afrobeat is like the export from Africa where everybody loved Africa.
Yeah.
It's like Brazilian music. But the traditional African music, I think it got a raise with the self-confidence, with the freedom that came to Africa. And it's not so long ago. I remember playing the 50th anniversary of Malian independence. That was like 3 years ago? 4 years ago. I played a concert there.
Yeah.
So it's a very young country. Oh, there's many very young countries that have sort of risen up from colonialism. The damage culturally that was inflicted on Africa is tremendous, forcing them to speak one language. I could see in Mali, the main language, the official language is Bambara.
Yeah.
But there is 4 huge Songhai, Futa. There's so many different languages that are spoken by like hundreds of people. And that, by the way, have like there was a Songhai empire in the north, and the in the south, the Wasulo. They were like, these are not just like a little village. These were like empires that covered big parts of Africa that was only like subdivided with the colonial method of divide and conquer. But we made Bambara the main language. So, but to make it French the main language, that's kind of like messed up.
Yeah.
So fucking learn a language. Yeah. How hard is it if you're like the ruler of the universe?
Yeah.
Like, yes, use your brain and learn some languages, you idiot. And, I have been involved in many like teaching projects in Africa. For one, there's a school that I started with my friend Gigi Hancock, Herbie's wife, in Benin. And I installed a program against the will of African, including the Africans, that taught traditional music to the children. And they said, why do we need that? We want to play Western music when we go to the studios. And I said, I live in the studios. I've made a lot of records. What they want from you is not another Marcus Miller.
Yeah.
They want what Marcus Miller can do, and this is your rhythms. Marcus Miller is going to come running and say, like, can you show me that? Where is one, he's going to say.
Yes.
So you learn your heritage and become strong with that. Yeah. And people would fight me because they had not learned to appreciate their own music. But it has changed, and I see it changing, and I love it. Jobate has a school in Gambia for kora. It's a kora school.
Awesome.
So you learn kora. If you play another instrument, for example, in Mali, my friend Derek Gripper, he goes to Tumani school for kora. He plays the whole thing. He's a classical guitar player on the guitar, but he learns all the music. He learns all the songs. So you're not obliged to play a traditional music, but the music it's millions of songs and rhythms that the colonial forces were very smart. You take the music away from the people, you take their soul away.
Yeah.
And in the plantations here in Africa, in America, they took the instruments away from the people because they realized, well, for one, it's a very funny. Kofo tells that story with the talking runs. They would like talk, and they would always wonder, why do the riots on different poblations start the same evening at the same time, miles and miles away? Because they tell with the drums, 6 o'clock, all hell breaks loose. You know when Kofo was playing in my band, when other Nigerians would come, he would talk Yoruba on the talking drum, like usually about like some girl's butt. And I see they're all laughing, and I say, Kofo, what are you playing? I don't speak Yoruba, but I know it was about her, what you said, because all the Nigerians are laughing. You're so right. I agree totally. So it's a real language,
Yes, I want to talk about your music. I don't want us to. I have a lot I could talk to you about, but I want to talk about your music. You have an amazing amount of collection, like at least 18 albums, right? 22. Wow.
I am old.
Wow.
They call me Mama O now.
Wow. But I've been listening to different albums by Leni Stern here and there. The latest, I want to dwell on the last one. I want to talk about it. It's called Dakar Suite, right? And I I'm gonna start with the one I really like. A song I really like. I think it's called Hide and Seek. I can't remember, but
you know that Keleni, that's what kids say when they play hide and seek.
Okay.
I don't know what they say in Nigeria.
We say
in Germany it's like a little rhyme.
Yeah.
And so that
we say moji, eh? That's what we say.
Yeah, moji. So it's just, you know, when I came to Africa and started playing with African people, this whole racism is on my nerves. Like on my nerves is not even. It's a very light expression of how deeply I think it is stupid. Because underneath our skins, we're the same. We're human beings, and that is like such a big deal to be a human being. In what color we come is really completely a minor shading. It's like, do I wear my hair up, my hair down? That's how important it is. Nothing aside from that. All the rest is nonsense we have created for the interest of power and greed and
money.
And so I always I found in my travels all over the world that there is so much more we have in common and it's different. Our differences are sort of fun. They're like the spice of life, but what we have in common. And when I find these children's songs, everywhere in the world, children play hide and seek. And everywhere they have a little song. What do you say? Moji in Nigeria.
Yeah, moji, hey, akarame, hey, make I come. We add a little English. Make I come. Should I come? Have you eaten?
Make I come.
Make I come. We say, yes, make I come, yes. And then we start looking for the person. Yeah.
So this Leni, Jamamu, is the way in Senegal the children play. So I put a little bit of a jazz melody in the front to a very Senegalese rhythm. And it's fascinating how the jazz rhythm and how this all fits the Senegalese rhythm and the jazz melodies. So because all the great jazz musicians were listening to African music and finding their way back home, after being torn away from it. Imagine somebody takes you away from your mother and says, "Mother, what's that?" Like completely confuses you, and then you find it again. So there has been this amazing love for African music in jazz when I came to study jazz. Then I went to Africa and I say, I know why. Now I understand. And I started writing in using the wealth of that you have given us, all these rhythms and different scales and harmonies influenced from the thousands of years of your history, from being conquered by the Arabs. And you got the makams that we play on the gonis, the pentatonic scales. I don't know where you got them from, the Wassalu. But there's such a wealth of music that I've explored and brought into a jazz context, so you can take those melodies and rhythms and improvise with them. Tell your own story. Talk about your travels. Tell what you've seen. This
album, the guitar solos are
thank you
on another level.
Thank you.
So I didn't hear any guitar solo on this song, on that hide and seek, until towards the end. I think the guitar solo came in. I'm like, okay, she's on fire now. And you were shedding. It's amazing, that song and all the other songs. I mean,
it's so fun to play with African musicians. I love it so much. Like, I can't stop.
It has that album, at least, and your other songs, they have this quality of relatability, and then
I love that. Thank
at the same time, and the skills are just like everywhere. Like, one could just, once I hear it, I'm like, okay, this is a well-studied, skilled musician who is down to earth and still want us to go on this journey with her, and then the lyrics, like Mercy, I love that song, Mercy. And other songs, it's just like, I'm not just appreciating it because I'm African, But from an African perspective, one thing I like about your music is that you give it its due. It's not like you're just taking an influence and putting it into your music. Like maybe
you can't really do that. It's like you go to European orchestral music and say like, I'm gonna kind of do that orchestra thing.
Yeah.
It's not gonna work.
No, yeah. So you spend your time. I mean, some people have tried doing African music and like Simon and Garfunkel.
Comes to like, the thing is, it's very complex. But the colonials have said, yes, there's some kind of monkey.
Yeah.
Are you crazy? They had civilizations before while you were sitting in a tree. That's how old they are. Look at Egypt. What were you doing 4,000 years ago? Not much, I think. And but they sort of like had to say that to justify their stealing of gold and gems, and so like it's like a good story, but it's a big fat lie. These are very sophisticated musical concepts, and it takes years. I am still studying and struggling every week. I study with Elijah Alun-Fai from the Five family of percussionists. They have been playing percussion for hundreds and hundreds of years. And Basiku Kuyate's great-grandfather played the boni. They only had 4 strings. Basiku added like 3 more, so now it's 7. Trying to compete with the kora, who's 19. It's a sort of mission impossible. But it's a serious music tradition, and being born in Germany, I know about serious music tradition. Since I'm a small child, I've studied classical music and classical guitar, and our way of trying to create an identity through music. So I can appreciate when I hear something complex. It's like, oh yeah, I remember that. It took me years to learn it, and it takes years to be efficient, but you have to sort of go through the lies that they told you about this culture that supposedly is inferior to excuse that you can steal from it. It's like, how does that excuse anything? I've still never, even then I don't get it, but it was just what they say. Savages. Savages, they invented democracy. It's so ignorant, but especially here in America, they had to justify slavery. You justify that, we sort of kind of saved them, That's how they like to say. But when you go to Africa and you're exposed, I don't know how Mali ended up to be such a hotbed of music and civilization. The Malians will tell you it comes from the whole Sundiata Keita Empire. And they had, what we spoke in the beginning, the French do that. They support the arts. And in the courts of Mali, they had kora orchestras at every corner. There was a kora player or a ngoni player and a singer singing the louange of the everybody had a griot. So it was a good job. There's a lot of jobs that if you could play kora, you could work like all the kings and all the princesses and the princes. They all needed musicians. So I am not as familiar with other cultures to know. Like
in Nigeria, for instance, Mali, one of the things I envy the Malians about when it comes to music is they did a very good job in institutionalizing their musical art. In Nigeria, we didn't. I don't think we did. And maybe it depends on the different tribes. We don't like the word tribes. We prefer ethnic groups in Nigeria. Within different tribes. But in Mali, I know that they could tell you the story of the instruments dating back to 1,000 years ago. They could.
But it's the story of the griots, the storytellers that were historians. There were some historians, they would just tell a story. Funake, I think they're called. My bambara is a little rusty. I've been trying to learn Wolof. They would come to the house when I was studying with Basiku. They would come to the house and they would just talk about the old days and when this king was fighting this king over this river. And then, so they were the history keepers and they were poets. They were like slam poetry, like the 3 wise men that came into the house, and I was like, whoa, check this shit out. And it's not, our slam poetry is about our day-to-day life today. And our philosophy and our mystical aspirations. But what they were doing was storytelling. Like, it was like, really? 2028 years ago in the summer that, that's how it started.
Yeah.
Sanya Takeda went to the river. And there's songs that date from that. Like the song that I sing on the record, Malisajo, about the hippopotamus.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Malisajo,
Yeah.
Bafula be Malisajo. Those are old stories, and to this day the kora players play them. I don't know how Mali got. It's interesting the point you made with the English colonial rule and the French colonial rule, that they had such a different impact.
Yeah.
I don't know that the French supported
feel
Malian music and the griots and all of that.
I think maybe they just let it be. I think the British were very keen on convincing us that our art forms and our religion, which was kind of intertwined with our music and art form, were paganism. We're not.
Nobody noticed the
evil.
resemblance to the Greek gods. Everybody thought that Zeus, that whole concept was paganism.
Yeah.
Is that even called paganism? It is. I know what you mean.
Yeah. That would be paganism too. But when Christianity came, so but I think that's what happened, because most of our arts were our carvings, our music was very
linked to our spirituality. It must have scared the hell out of them.
Yes,
they must have been so scared when they came to Africa in the first place. These little English guys with bad teeth. When they saw the first Africans, they must have really thought, this was a mistake, I think. Where's my gun?
You're from Germany?
I am from Germany.
Okay.
I was born in Germany.
Yeah, and you moved here for school?
I came to study film scoring here. I had already written music and played in bands, and I worked as an actress as well.
Okay.
And I came because the universities in America are cool, and you could study film scoring. The school I went to, Berklee College of Music, had a connection to the film school.
Okay.
So we would score the film students' films,
and
it was hands-on, and we had the whole school of musicians at our disposition for our composition.
Yeah.
So, to me, mixing things when you come from a film scoring way is like what I studied. In films, I remember that the other day, one of the things that you have to know how to do, when the film cuts to Africa, you're in England, you plan a trip, and then before the picture shows you Africa, the music will show you Africa. It's a very common thing. That was one of the things you had to learn, how to define a place. So you can't all of a sudden play African music because you have your whole film score. So you mix the theme of the music with the music of all of those techniques of mixing cultures but also clearly promoting emotion. Because that's what, as a film composer, you have to do. So those studies were very interesting.
Do you still do any kind of film scoring?
I haven't in a long time.
Okay.
I've gotten so absorbed with just pure composition and just playing in bands and making records that I rarely do. More often now I play on other people's film scores. I play music on them, and I've scored silent films. That was a big sort of thing here in New York to score the old silent films. Like, how they used to have a piano player, but they did it for everybody now got to score the silent films.
So you, after college, you moved to New York.
Yeah.
And you've been here since then. You're like a New Yorker for life.
It was sort of my basis, but I've traveled the world since college. I've been lucky to play in the whole world. I used to, this winter that is so cold, I used to think, every summer, I started going every summer to India, studying Indian music. And then every winter I went to India. Yeah. And then every winter I went to Africa because this cold and these short days.
Yes.
The sun goes down at 4:30. No. It's like more than a normal person can tolerate, And it comes up at 9. Now the days have become longer. Thank God. But I used to get out of the plane like around December 20th when here everything slowed down, and the warm air and the smell of the Mali earth would hit me, and I'd be so happy.
You know who else who went to Mali and really liked it and made an album out of it? Didi Bridgewater.
Yeah, I know her very well.
Yeah, she did the album. I think it's called Red Earth.
Red Earth.
Yeah, and I also like the way she approached it. She just let the music be the Malian music, and
the producer of that record was Shekti Diansek. It didn't get mentioned very much, but he's one of my favorite African music producers. He did a record very early on with Hank Jones. It's called Sabali.
Yeah, okay.
And it's one of the best mixtures of jazz and African music. They both play keyboards.
Okay.
And I had the pleasure of working with Shekti Diansek, both in his projects. We played a festival together in the desert together once, but for the big finale, he was the musical director. And as a matter of fact, when I was musical director for Acoustic Africa, I often thought of him because working under him as a musician was like amazing. He had a specific way of teaching Westerners the African groove, which I don't know if this is too technical, but he would give them the bass drum pattern.
I've seen it on YouTube.
How he does that.
Yeah.
And that's genius, because you cannot tell somebody who doesn't know African music what it is. It's too complex. What is a symphony?
Yeah.
Well, how many years do you have? But he, like, you see him do that. He just says, easy. And that's the anchor for everything. And if it gets lost, he gets up from the piano.
Yeah.
And he shows you again. So there's a lot of things I picked up from him. Also the way he used the vocals. And he did. I was very surprised to see that he didn't get the full credit, because he did that record. He did Bridgewater's record is Shekti Diansek. That's his arrangements. I know, because, I used to always play the New Year's concerts with Salif Keita, and Salif would invite me, like he would, like it was an international concert, and sometimes he invite me and Shekti Diansek. And I got along very well with Shekti Diansek because he was a big fan of Joe Zawinul, who's from Austria, like right next door from me. So we talked a lot about Joe and jazz. Sheikh loved jazz, and my development, sort of, you mentioned Dakar Suite. Was a mixture of Malian and Senegalese music, which
I was gonna ask
Sheikh
that.
is half. He's there again. You go with the borders. That there is so many people that are half Senegalese and half Malian, but it's really the same people. There is no half, but there is different rhythm. There is the rhythm of the Wolofi, the Sabars, and the strings of Mali, and Sheikh always mixed it. And another one who mixed it, who always had Sabar drummers, was Toumani Jabate. He had a concert every Saturday night at a venue called the Diplomat. They had excellent African food.
Where is this?
In Mali, in Bamako.
Mali, okay.
And after midnight, Toumani would come out and play with the orchestra symmetric, and there were 3 or 4 drummers from Senegal that would mix that Sabar rhythm with the Malian music, and everybody was like, "What is he doing?" And then everybody got up and danced. So they said, "We don't care what he's doing. It feels fabulous." So
nice.
That had inspired me for Dakar Suite, because I had heard how Toumani mixed the 2 different worlds together, and I thought, like, oh, let me see if I can't go in that direction. And Shekti Diansek. I mean, both of them have been a tremendous influence on me musically.
Awesome.
And of course, Amisako, the great Malian singer, who taught me Malisaju. I studied with her, and she taught me that song and showed me how to be a griot, like to be an official tariff. I mean, I was officially I'm an official griot. I sang for the president. Ami thought she had many
Is she
students.
the vocalist on one of your songs called Omo? Is she one of the vocalists? There's a song called, you have an EP of 5 songs. The first, it's
My Name is Umu.
My Name is Umu.
That's Amisako, yeah.
Okay.
That's Amisako. I studied African singing with her, and she taught me to, the greeting of the Griot, where you mentioned everybody's family and all that. She taught me how to sing that. And then she made me sing it for the president of Mali.
Wow.
Because she made me sing it on TV because of all of her students, I was the only white one. No, actually, there was a Polish girl also. But they were like the majority of them were black girls, Malian girls, Senegalese, Gambia, like everybody that was around us. And me and the Polish girl, we were the only Europeans, the only white faces in there. So they always thought it was particularly, well, it's ironic to have a white person pay homage to African culture. It's like a reparation. It's like paying homage to the great culture of your country by learning your songs. That's kind of what I've been doing. So they really thought it was very interesting that I would sing Sorry Jimbe Jali Tigini Jali Tamanka and it was good for them. The same way that Salif really liked to have like a white girl working for him, not telling him what to do, but he tell me what to do. He said, no, don't come in yet. Come in when I tell you. He said, okay, Sibu, it's okay. Say the word and I'm here. It was sort of a healing of all the wrong that has been done. And in culture, in music, it takes its most beautiful forms,
Yeah. Awesome.
I mean, my last 8 records have been an homage to Africa.
I see that. I hear that.
It has been a gift to me from Africa with all the beautiful music that the African people have taught me and shared with me and let me in on their secrets, on their culture, and taking me to be initiated and learn the mystical, magical world that has been without real interruption for thousands and thousands of years.
You do it really well, I must say.
Thank you.
Yes,
it means a lot
you do.
to hear that.
You do it really well.
Person.
Yeah.
I love it.
It shows. I want to talk about the music business. You, correct me if I'm wrong, you remain an independent artist and you have your own recording label. And has it always been that way?
No, I was signed to 3 different labels. Actually, I made 9 records for other labels.
Okay.
And then this thing happened where a label that I was signed to was bought by a bigger label.
Okay.
And they, like a corporate takeover. The label I was signed to was like he was actually a piano player, Jonathan Becker, and he had a great eye for great music. So he collected great music. But they offered him a lot of money so he could do his productions in a, bigger, better, bigger. And so he agreed, but then they dropped some of his artists. And I was one of the artists that, who wants a woman playing electric guitar? What is that anyway? So they dropped me and like in a real corporate way, they did it the day before I was supposed to go record. So I had already hired the musician. So I went to the bank and used my credit cards and recorded anyway because I had already flown people in, like Dennis Chambers, like many people were not even living in New York, but they were people that I had been on tour with. So it was a large ensemble, and the studio already was paid. You can't reserve it without paying. So so I recorded, and then the guy that had hired me, he quit that company because he realized they dropped his artists. They just wanted to take what they wanted from him. They couldn't sign the artists, but they didn't want all of his artists. There were certain artists they wanted, and they really didn't want him to. They were like not a nice company. They were a very big company. Don't want to name any names. So he got into a fight with them, and he left, and he found a new partner with a lot of money, but a little bit better
to
policy.
Artists.
So they approached me about the record that they had initially wanted to make, that I had financed now. I was still angry. So I didn't even want to see the face of that guy. Because imagine, this happens to me the day I have to go sing and play guitar and conduct a large ensemble. I was at the end of my nerves. I was very angry. So I said, well, if you want this record, I don't think you can afford it, you last of the human beings. I said, what's your price? I said, 50,000. I just said it like, meaning, you can't afford it. I
Yeah.
don't ever want to see your face again. And he said, okay. And he wrote a check for $50,000.
Wow.
I had made the record for $20,000. So I had some money. Put the money in the bank. But they signed me and his new partner. They were like, yeah, we make record 2, record 3. So I had to make 3 records for them. When my contract was over, I took the money from the first record and I started producing my own records. Because I realized that what they were doing was a tenement to slavery. You know, they give you a percentage of their sales interest. You know, now it's all moot anyway, but back they would make money off the CDs. So you would get, you know, I negotiated very hard and I got 14% of their profit, but first I had to pay back their investment in me. And that was not itemized. It was like, okay, the studio cost, the mastering, the musician, the costs, and then the publicity costs, our food, our hotel. You know, that was like an endless list of what you had to pay them back, so that you actually had to wait a very long time before you ever got paid. You know, they did the counting, you had the right to audit, but it was like all a very disadvantageous business for the musician. And, you know, it was just when I saw that they had all this money, they were just not giving it to me. I said, there's something wrong with this picture, and let me just see. Because, you know, as a women composer and electric guitar player, very often people feel the need to give you advice, even when they're less qualified than you.
I understand what you're saying.
And that would
it's funny.
be like, that gets like harder and harder to tolerate.
Yeah.
Because it, like, you know, one time I was signed to a label and the I won't mention any names, the head of the label was in the studio while we were recording, and he kept saying stuff. He had no idea about making records. He had ideas of selling records.
Yeah.
My first records, they were sold in like the whole world. In Brazil, people bought my records. Places I had never been, but he had no idea about how we do it. So at one point, the engineer talks to me, and he quietly said, if he opens his mouth one more time, I will do what he says. And the entire band said, no, Malcolm, you can't do that to us, please. It's a beautiful situation you find yourself in, you know, because somebody pays, and it's like, you know, it's like a relic from some other time. So since I had already the leftover money sitting in the bank, I just figured out, let me see if I can't produce it myself. I had a very good producer, Hiram Bullock, the guitar player. He was my producer on my first 2 albums, and I learned a lot from him. And his way of producing was very inclusive. He would always ask me to make decisions. So he wasn't like, you do this, like that. Which one do you like better? Do you like this? Do you like that? And I was always like, why is he asking me? But I sort of started getting into the production and how you make the record, how you make the music. He used to say, jump out from the speakers. I said, what do you mean jump out from the speakers? And then he said, listen. And he showed it to me. And I said, isn't that interesting? So I learned from him and from other producers I worked with, George Whiddy, the great keyboard player. I worked with him, and we would always, like, for the mix, we had 2 yellow pads, and we sit on the couch and play the mix, and we make notes what we don't like. And then we compare our notes. So it was a very fun experience. So much better than just being the artist in the corner and being constantly criticized or glorified. Like, brilliant, unacceptable. So it's like, up and down, up and down.
And then suddenly they drop the person.
And then suddenly it's like, you're fired. Like, it's my music. What are you? Who are you? You know, that whole system. I mean, it worked to a certain degree. By the time I got into it, the record companies had gotten so extravagant. The artistic part of the music business, that we owe all these great records for the old Atlantic records, the Blue Note records. The artists had really gone overboard, and they charged their cocaine expenses and their living expenses. So the bookkeepers of the record companies, there's many books where you can read about it. The bookkeepers of the record companies said, like, we're never going to make any profit, so we're going to have to take charge. And then the financial side started changing styles. And you had these, like, ignorant accountants standing in the studio trying to make musical decisions, because it went too far the other way, and then it came back to the accountants who didn't understand the process of making music, and they started making this, drop this, drop that, and see what sells, only from the point of view. But in their defense, I have to say they came by it honestly, because before then they had these budgets of, like, in the 60s of $250,000 to make like a rock and roll record of 30 minutes. That's how long they were, because they would come to the studio and like start rehearsing, start practicing songs, and like, and finally the accountant said, we're taking charge, and that was a good, and then the music business completely changed. And now, I had my record company before downloads and the internet became so big. But it turned out that I was in the right spot in time, because I had already started being an independent before it became a trend. So I knew all the ropes, and I'm to this day distributed by Sony, because I always have been. But as an independent artist, it's very hard to get that now. But I've done the last 13 records on my own.
On your own.
On my own.
Now, my question is this: as an independent artist, I am very afraid of putting all my savings into a record that I am not sure of how it's gonna do, Is there anything you can say about that? Any kind of advice in terms of maybe distribution? I don't know. Like,
don't put all your savings into your record for once. Music should not be your main revenue. What you do with the music can become your revenue, but you have to save half of your money for promotion and for making a marketing plan, how to place the music, how to place it in films, how to have other artists record your songs, how to be included in compilations. But if you make a record, if you make excellent quality, it's like anything excellent you make. If you make excellent jewelry, it doesn't lose its value. It'll be timeless. But you really it has to be excellent. And if it is excellent, it will find its way. Like with anything, like a good song is a good song, and it can originate from anywhere.
True.
And it finds its way. It's for people, we make music for people, and people hear it, and it resonates with them. You have to find a resonance with your audience, and then you also have to be a little bit smart of a businessman, because like people like the people that took over the record companies, the accountants, that's their business to sell. So either you have a partner that does that for you, or you go study a little bit, and it's not that hard. Especially nowadays, there's so many platforms you can present your music at.
Yes, yeah. But the thing is this,
No problem.
It turns out as an artist, there are a lot of things that you have to do. You have to, of course, you have to do your music. You have to practice, keep practicing, working on your music. And then if you are an independent up-and-coming artist, you don't have the money, or you don't have the luxury of being able to hire people to do your management, maybe your booking and all those
That's
things.
That's old shit.
Yeah.
That doesn't count anymore.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
That was my percussionist.
Okay.
I'm going to have a percussion class later.
Okay.
I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, about an independent artist being having to.
Oh yeah, the manager, publicist.
Yeah.
No. You don't need that.
Yeah.
You don't need that. You can speak for yourself.
Yeah.
You're not 12. a manager, the thing with the manager, I stopped having all of these things because the manager gets 20%. The booking agent also wants 20%. That's 40% down. 60 for you. The record company already takes everything. You don't need these people. You start on your own. You get your computer, you get your phone, you have a good social media presence. You connect with other musicians. You go out to hear music, and then you find a place maybe for your own band to play. You start a place. We used to, when I was a young musician, my teacher was Bill Frisell, and I said, I would really like to play. And he said, I tell you what, if you get a gig, I'll play with you. We'll do a duo. He said later that he didn't think I was actually going to do it because he told it to so many of his students and nobody did it. But I was like, a good girl. You tell me something. Back then, I was more of a good girl. And he said, okay, he said I should practice altered scale and I should go to. So I went to the gig. The first one was on Houston Street. There was this Brazilian restaurant, and they had this beautiful windows with flowers and I said to the owner, I said, if we sit here near the window and play music, I bet you more people would come in. And he said, you have a point. I pay you each $50 and you play from 7 to 10. And I said, oh, thank you so much. And he said, and you can have some food.
Wow.
And he gave us a gig. So I called Bill Frisell and he said, the thing that you said about I should get us a gig, I did. And he was laughing. And he said, how did you do it? I said, well, you said I should just see if I can find a place. So I found a place. And we get $50 each. And we have to play from 7 to 9, 10. So that's what you do.
Yes.
And then you find your audience, people that say oh, isn't that the Nigerian handsome boy that's playing? Let me go see him again. Let me tell my girlfriends, let's go see him. Let's see if we don't feel better after he sings for us. So you start creating, and it's very organic.
Yeah.
I actually like it better than pumping up to be a superstar and then this unnatural, huge, all of a sudden you have crazy fans and you build your audience. My friend Magda Giannikou, she did that from Banda Magda. She's from Greece. And actually we both played called Magdalena. And we studied with the same composer at Berkeley. It's very fun. But she started playing in restaurants because they wanted music. So every day she played in a different restaurant, and the people that heard her music at the restaurants, they became avid fans. They would they made their dinner reservations asking, is today the night where the Greek girl plays? And then they say, it's not. When does she play? Okay, we'll come. It's Thursday. So there's many stories like that of people that have, it's just, today is a time of anything is possible.
Yes.
You make a little video, you do your blog, and you find out interesting things. People need music. You got to know that. People need music, and it's a service you're doing. It's up to you to find the best circumstances for it, but you can be very creative for it. And, I have to see after 40 years of doing this, I'm still having fun.
That's very important.
There is hard things, but it's not that hard. Practicing is a privilege.
Yeah.
You make beautiful sounds, occasionally there's mean-spirited people in the world. You get far away from them. Or you take some martial arts classes and get very close to them. There's ways of dealing with it,
Thank you for this advice. Thank you.
Does you feel that?
Yes. There's a lot. You said a lot, and just only one is enough to start with.
Yeah.
So thank you. We're gonna do something fun. But this segment, I call it turn up or mute. Sometimes I call it turn up and mute. I'm gonna give you two options. The one you like, you turn it up. The other one, we mute it. But it's about how you feel at the moment, right? So you choose one option. It's like, oh, turn it up. So it's a difficult question. It's a difficult game because it's you have to choose between two things that you see. Okay. So Dakar and New York. Which one? Which one do you turn up? How you feel at the moment? You could turn up some other thing later on.
I love New York.
You love New York. Okay. Nice. Understandable. Guitar, cats.
Both up. Well, guitar first.
Guitar
cats.
first. Okay.
Sorry, cats.
Because I looked at your Instagram. You have a lot of cats on your Instagram. Very beautiful cats.
I love cats. They're good company when you practice. They sit there, they listen
They
to
just
you.
listen to you.
They say nothing. Sometimes they play the guitar with their teeth. I've never been able to catch that.
Yeah. All right. Be careful about this one. Mercy, hide and seek. You have to choose one.
Mercy.
Oh, I love Mercy too. But hide and seek for me.
I have to write down how you say it. How do you say the Nigerian again? What's the Nigerian song?
Moji.
Moji.
Yeah.
I love that.
Moji, yeah. I'll just say Moji, yeah. Akara me. Make I come. Yes, make I come. Yes. And then I start looking for you. Leni Stern, thank you so much for allowing me to do this and hosting me at your place and making me tea. Thank you so much. I hope we can do this again.
I hope so too. This has been a lot of fun.
This
was great talking to you about all these things too.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lord have mercy on us all. Evening sun shines on the fields below, covers all in gentle light. Can we forgive and start all over now? Wrong is wrong and right is right. Can we learn to love each other? Let compassion light the way. If God alone should stand in judgment, can He stop this madness? Keep us safe till we come home and leave our troubles here below. Heaven bound we go. Mercy, Lord have mercy. Mercy, Lord have mercy on us all. Mercy, Lord have mercy. Mercy, Lord have mercy on us all. Churches burning in the southern night, shadows of a shameful past. The light of progress will be shining bright, and reason will prevail at last. When we believe that we are brothers, our blood is red, our hearts beat strong. Compassion is the only answer. Love is always right, and hate is always wrong. Yes, we will leave our troubles here below. Heaven bound we Lane. Chamamu, chamamu, chamamu Lane. Chanka tu batalu, chanka tu batalu. Olemu, dance, 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 dance. Keleleti Lane. Chamamu, chamamu, chamamu Lane. Chanka tu batalu, chanka tu batalu. Olemu, dance, 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 dance. Keleleti Lane. Chamamu, chamamu, chamamu Lane. Chanka tu batalu, chanka tu batalu. Olemu, dance, 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 dance. Keleleti Lane. Chamamu, chamamu, chamamu Lane. Chanka tu batalu, chanka tu batalu. Olemu, dance,